Welcome to Earth and Kind Quests. My name is Mike, and this video shares a few simple steps for you to make these same old monsters feel like unique and memorable new creatures in Dungeons & Dragons. You may be familiar with this approach of reskinning or reinterpreting monsters. I started with pre-existing monsters in the basic rules. I customized primarily by reimagining the physical appearance and the thematics. Mostly I ignored the established history and lore about these monsters, and instead I allowed for the setting and themes of our adventure to tell the story. The level of effort was just within a few minutes that I will share in this video, almost entirely about interpretive thematics, and involving extremely little about game mechanics and monster statistics. Physical appearance. In a desert adventure, the characters met a group of desert scavengers. They were small-sized humanoids, accompanied by their mounts of large-sized reptiles. The scavengers kept their faces and their entire bodies covered, protected from the heat and harshness of the desert environment. Built into their protective clothing, a layer of insulation circulated cool water, and a tank of water was attached as a kind of backpack. What do they want? The desert scavengers developed their way of life and their society around scavenging, tinkering, and bartering. These aspects were layered over their lives as nomadic hunter-gatherers roaming through the desert. They always will be interested in finding new materials and in haggling for the best deals. They enjoy being creative with old and broken equipment, repurposing their acquisitions into products of higher sales value. How do they behave? I based the behaviors and motivations on a combination of the Jawas in Star Wars and on the Ferengi in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. If ever I felt unsure about what to do with these creatures, then I always could fall back on those pre-existing examples and inspiration. These scavengers try to look fierce as a way to gain an upper hand with their primary goals of negotiations and bartering, yet they never would want to be in a violent or hostile confrontation. In most cases, they would consider if a dangerous situation might be worth risking in order to acquire a special treasure, at least in their perspective. Upon sighting the characters, the scavengers immediately wanted to inspect whatever assets that the characters were wearing or carrying. They pointed at the items that they wanted, and they gestured to some of their own belongings for bartering. How do they communicate? The desert scavengers spoke a language that sounded like a string of muttering and chittering that no outsider could understand. They augmented their spoken words by using sign language, by miming with actions and gestures, and by drawing symbols in the sand. One character was able to communicate decently, coming from a desert nomad background and being proficient with common sign language. For the other characters, the options were limited and rudimentary. Likely scenarios. You probably could imagine the potential for the classic game pillars of exploration, social interaction, and combat. In terms of exploration, the characters could learn more about who the desert scavengers are and how their society operates. They could explore through the perspective of the scavengers about the major geographic features in the region and about anyone or anything that they have seen recently. These aspects of exploration overlap with social interaction. More strongly within the realm of social interaction, the characters could barter for supplies, essential food and water, navigation directions through the desert, or other possibilities. In terms of combat, the desert nomads by default will prefer to avoid these situations. They will try to look fierce and dangerous, yet they will be quick to run away whenever the risk of danger will become too high in comparison to the potential for acquisitions and bartering. If combat will be necessary or forced upon them, then the desert nomads will disengage at their earliest opportunity and use the speed of their reptilian mounts to escape to a safe distance and the nearest hiding place. Game mechanics. Maybe you have guessed that these monsters were goblins riding giant lizards. I could have used the monster statistics exactly as presented in the basic rules with no further effort on my part. However, I wanted to make minor adjustments. In my view, the desert scavengers would not carry shields, and instead they would keep their hands free most of the time. Additionally, I felt that a crossbow would suit them better than a short bow, given my inspiration with the Jawas and the Ferengi. I noticed that the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica already presented a goblin gang member that could work perfectly for what I wanted with the desert scavengers. Even without access to this book, the minor adjustments would be simple enough to apply. The characters drive the story. Most importantly, I avoided the tendency to overload about every small detail of the desert scavengers and their reptilian mounts. Instead, I encouraged the characters to make their own decisions, and then I adjusted with whatever happened to be relevant and consistent with the situation. One character struggled to communicate and eventually traded for a life-saving supply of drinking water. Another character learned important information about what had happened lately in the areas where the scavengers had roamed, and the scavengers sketched a map in the sand to indicate the locations related to these stories. Depending on how our adventure will develop, the characters may yet meet the desert scavengers again. I am curious to learn about your thoughts and experiences with reskinning or reinterpreting old monsters to make them feel new again. Please feel free to share in the comment section. As always, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.